My name is Trevor. I am 25 years old, and I never thought my own father would try to steal my paycheck. After years of watching him favor my younger brother, Kyle, I finally landed a great software engineering job with a salary I was proud of. Then came the family meeting, where Dad unveiled his grand plan for my money. The look in his eyes when I refused still haunts me sometimes. Before I dive into how my own father tried to take my hard-earned money, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button. Because trust me, the moment I finally stood up to my dad after years of being the forgotten son is something you do not want to miss. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, where the summer heat was only matched by the burning resentment I felt watching my father shower my younger brother with affection, while barely acknowledging my existence. Our house was modest but comfortable, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a small backyard where Dad would spend hours teaching Kyle to throw a football. I was never invited to those impromptu training sessions. From as early as I can remember, it was clear that my father, Gerald, had chosen his favorite child. Kyle is 3 years younger than me, currently 22, and has always been the golden child who could do no wrong in our father's eyes. The contrast in how we were treated was so obvious that even our neighbors and teachers noticed, though they rarely said anything directly to me about it. Everything changed dramatically when my mother passed away. I was 16 at the time and Kyle was 13. Mom had been battling cancer for almost 2 years, and though we knew the prognosis was not good, her death still hit our family like a hurricane. She had been my buffer, the one person who made sure I received some semblance of parental love and support. With her gone, the dynamic shifted even further in Kyle's favor. During the funeral, I remember standing stoically beside my father as he comforted Kyle, his arm wrapped protectively around my brother's shoulders while I stood alone, invisible in my grief. That moment crystallized what I had always known, but had tried to deny in my father's eyes. I would always be secondary. The material differences in our treatment became impossible to ignore after Mom died. When Kyle turned 16, Dad bought him a brand new Ford Mustang, complete with custom rims and a premium sound system. When I had turned 16 just 3 years earlier, I received nothing. I saved up for 2 years working at a local grocery store to buy a 15-year-old Honda Civic that broke down almost every month. While Kyle received the latest iPhone each year, designer clothes, and expensive gaming systems, I learned to buy my own necessities. By 17, I was working 30 hours a week at the grocery store while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. I had realized early on that education would be my ticket to independence. Throughout high school, I applied for every scholarship I could find, staying up late after work to complete applications while Kyle played video games in the living room with our dad cheering him on. The contrast could not have been more stark. I was effectively raising myself while Kyle continued to be coddled and spoiled. I managed to secure a partial scholarship to Arizona State University, but it only covered about 60% of my tuition. To make up the difference and pay for my living expenses, I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college. I would stock shelves at a local supermarket from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., attend classes until 3 p.m., then work as a barista until closing time at 10 p.m. Weekends were spent either picking up extra shifts or studying in the library because our house was usually too noisy with Kyle's friends coming over. Meanwhile, Kyle barely graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA. Despite this, Dad paid for him to attend a private university with tuition nearly 3 times what ASU cost. Kyle dropped out after 1 semester, claiming the school was not a good fit. Dad consoled him, saying he just needed to find his path, and promptly paid for him to attend another college. This pattern repeated 3 more times over the next few years, with Kyle dropping out each time for increasingly trivial reasons. Through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights, I graduated with a degree in computer science, landing on the dean's list despite my grueling work schedule. My father and Kyle did attend my graduation, though they arrived late and left early because Kyle had a party he wanted to attend. After graduation, I was fortunate enough to receive a job offer from a prestigious tech company in Phoenix. The starting salary of $75,000 per year felt like a fortune after years of scraping by. I found a small but decent apartment about 20 minutes from the office, and finally felt like I was building my own life. Throughout this time, Kyle had cycled through 5 different majors, at 4 different schools, never completing more than a semester at each. Now, 22. He had moved back home with Dad supposedly to figure things out. In reality, he spent most days playing video games and most nights partying with friends, all on Dad's dime. Dad never once suggested Kyle get a job or contribute to household expenses. Instead, he gave him a credit card and a monthly allowance that I later learned was nearly $2,000, all while Kyle contributed nothing to the household or his own future. Despite the obvious unfairness of our situations, I still tried to maintain a relationship with my family. I would visit for Sunday dinners when invited, bring modest gifts for birthdays and holidays, and try to engage in conversations about their lives. These efforts were rarely reciprocated, but I kept trying, holding on to the hope that one day I might be seen as an equal member of the family rather than an outsider looking in. Little did I know that my financial success would soon become the catalyst for one of the most difficult confrontations of my life. After 2 years of giving everything to my job, the hard work finally paid off. I had been putting in 60 to 70-hour weeks, taking on the projects nobody else wanted, and constantly learning new programming languages and frameworks on my own time. My dedication caught the attention of upper management, and I was called into a meeting with my director, Sarah, on a Friday afternoon. "Trevor, your performance has been exceptional," Sarah said, sliding a folder across her desk. "We would like to offer you a promotion to senior software engineer effective next month." When I opened the folder and saw the new salary, I nearly fell out of my chair. They were bumping me from $75,000 to $95,000 annually, plus an improved benefits package and stock options. After years of financial struggle of counting every penny and worrying about unexpected expenses, this felt like winning the lottery. I spent the entire weekend in a state of disbelief, running the numbers over and over. After taxes, this would mean an extra $1,000 in my pocket each month. I could finally build a proper emergency fund, start seriously saving for retirement, maybe even think about buying a home in a few years instead of renting. Sunday dinner at my father's house came around, and despite our complicated relationship, I was excited to share my good news. Part of me, a part I could never quite silence despite years of disappointment, still craved my father's approval. I wanted him to be proud of what I had accomplished through my own hard work and determination. I arrived at the familiar ranch-style house carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than I would normally spend a small celebration gift. Kyle's beat-up Jeep was in the driveway, the one Dad had bought him after he crashed the Mustang. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door I still had a key to but never felt comfortable using. Dad answered, looking the same as always in his plaid shirt and worn jeans. "You are late," he said by way of greeting, though I was actually 5 minutes early, according to my watch. "Sorry," I replied automatically, a reflexive response ingrained since childhood. "I brought wine." I handed him the bottle. He glanced at it briefly before setting it on the entryway table without comment. "Kyle is in the living room. Dinner is almost ready." I found Kyle sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, playing the latest edition of Call of Duty on a brand new gaming system I recognized as having been released just weeks earlier. He barely looked up when I entered. "Hey," I said, taking a seat in the adjacent armchair. "Sup," he replied, eyes still fixed on the screen where he was enthusiastically shooting at digital enemies. Dinner was Dad's usual pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the same meal he made for almost every family dinner. As we sat around the table, I decided it was time to share my news. So I got some good news on Friday. I began trying to keep my voice casual despite my excitement. I got promoted at work. Kyle paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. Dad's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his eyes narrowing slightly. "That is great," Dad said after a moment, his tone not matching his words. "More responsibilities?" "Yes," I replied, encouraged by the question. "I will be leading my own team on a new project. It comes with a pretty significant raise, too." "How significant?" Dad asked, and something in his tone made me hesitate. It was not the proud curiosity of a father. It was something more calculating. "They are bumping me up to $95,000, I answered, instantly regretting the specificity. The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. Kyle set down his fork with a clatter. "Seriously? That is like, what, $8,000 a month?" "Before taxes," I clarified. "But yes, it is a big increase." Dad was nodding slowly, and I noticed him glance at Kyle with an expression I could not quite decipher. "You must be very pleased," he said in a tone that somehow made it sound like my success was an inconvenience. The conversation quickly shifted to Kyle's latest interest, some cryptocurrency scheme he was convinced would make him rich if Dad would just invest a few $1,000s to get him started. The discussion about my promotion was over almost before it began. Throughout the rest of dinner, I noticed Dad and Kyle exchanging glances and having whispered conversations when they thought I was not paying attention. A sense of unease began to build in my stomach, but I dismissed it as paranoia. As I was preparing to leave, Dad surprised me by saying, "We should have a family meeting next weekend to discuss some financial matters." "What kind of financial matters?" I asked, instantly wary. "Just family business," he replied vaguely. "Sunday at 4. Do not be late." The next day at work, I mentioned the strange dinner interaction to my coworker and friend Marcus. We were grabbing coffee in the break room when I recounted the odd reaction to my news. "Be careful, man," Marcus warned, stirring his coffee with more focus than the task required. "I have seen this happen before. Family members suddenly get very interested when your bank account grows." It is not like that I defended automatically, though a part of me wondered if it was exactly like that. They are my family. Marcus gave me a skeptical look. "Just watch yourself. Family, or not money, changes how people see you. Trust me on this." I laughed off his concern, but his words stayed with me throughout the week. Surely my own father and brother would not try to take advantage of me. Despite our difficult relationship, we were still family, and family does not do that to each other. How wrong I was. The following Sunday arrived, and I found myself driving to my father's house with a knot of apprehension in my stomach. The vague mention of a financial discussion had been bothering me all week, but I had convinced myself it was probably about something innocuous, like Dad wanting advice on his retirement planning, or maybe even Kyle finally showing interest in getting a job. I arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, determined not to give my father any reason to criticize me. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in. In the dining room, Dad called out when he heard me enter. I walked through the familiar hallway, noting the family photos on the wall that predominantly featured Kyle throughout the years, with only a handful including me. As I entered the dining room, I stopped short at the sight before me. Dad and Kyle were sitting side by side at the table. Spread out in front of them were several printed spreadsheets, a calculator, and what appeared to be a makeshift contract. They had clearly been there for some time, preparing for whatever this meeting was about. "Sit down, Trevor," Dad said, gesturing to the chair across from them. His tone was businesslike, nothing like a father greeting his son. I sat cautiously, glancing between them. Kyle had an odd smirk on his face that immediately put me on edge. "We have been doing some calculations," Dad began without preamble, sliding one of the spreadsheets toward me. "Now that you have this new position and increased income, we need to discuss your family obligations." I looked down at the paper in front of me and felt my blood run cold. It was a detailed breakdown of my new salary with percentages allocated to different categories. At the top, in bold letters, was written Trevor's contribution plan. "What is this?" I asked, though the sinking feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. Dad cleared his throat. "As the successful member of this family, it is time for you to help support your father and brother. We have worked out a fair arrangement." He pointed to the spreadsheet. 80% of your salary will go to supporting Kyle while he continues to find his path. The remaining 20% will come to me to cover the years I spent raising you and to help with household expenses. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I looked at Kyle, who was nodding along as if this made perfect sense. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed to say. "This is not a joke," Dad said firmly. "Family takes care of family. Kyle needs time to find himself without the pressure of mundane employment holding back his potential. And I am not getting any younger. I deserve to enjoy my later years." Kyle leaned forward. "Yeah, bro. You always were the smart one. It is not like this money means that much to you anyway. You are like super frugal." I was speechless as they continued outlining their plans for my money. Kyle had already compiled a list of things he needed. A new car, A trip to Europe to find himself a high-end computer for a vague business idea he had. Dad spoke about home renovations and possibly a vacation property in Florida. Hold on, I finally interrupted. You are seriously asking me to give you 100% of my salary. What exactly am I supposed to live on? Dad waved his hand dismissively. You can keep living in your apartment. We figured you can pick up some extra work on weekends if you need spending money. The audacity was stunning. I looked more closely at their calculations and saw they had even accounted for my expected tax rate to ensure they were getting the full percentages of my net income, not just my gross salary. This is insane, I said, pushing the paper away. I worked hard for this promotion. This money is mine. After everything I have done for you, Dad's voice took on the wounded tone I had heard so many times before. I put a roof over your head, food in your mouth. I raised you after your mother died. You did the bare minimum, I replied, feeling years of resentment bubbling to the surface. I have been taking care of myself since I was 16. See how ungrateful he is, Dad said to Kyle, who nodded in exaggerated agreement. After all we have done. All you have done, I repeated incredulously. What exactly have you done for me, Dad? You bought Kyle a brand new car for his 16th birthday. I got nothing. You paid for his college, multiple colleges, while I worked 2 jobs to put myself through school. You give him an allowance even now at 22, while you have never given me a single dollar of support since Mom died. Kyle rolled his eyes. Here we go with the poor Trevor story again. Some of us just need more support. Okay. Not everyone can be a robot like you. I turned to him. Support is one thing. What you are asking for is not support. It is parasitic. Dad slammed his hand on the table. That is enough. This is not up for debate. You will sign this agreement today. He pushed the makeshift contract toward me. It is very simple. 80% to Kyle, 20% to me, starting with your next paycheck. I picked up the contract, scanned it briefly, and then did something that shocked even me. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle, but quickly grew into full-blown laughter that contained years of pent-up frustration and disbelief. Both Dad and Kyle stared at me as if I had lost my mind. You actually put this in writing, I said when I could finally speak. You actually created a document demanding I give you all my money. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this is? Dad's face was turning red. There is nothing ridiculous about family obligations. This is not family obligation, I replied, my voice suddenly calm as clarity washed over me. This is exploitation. And I will not be signing anything. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife as the reality of my refusal sank in. What happened next would forever change our family dynamic. What do you mean you will not sign it? Dad demanded, his voice rising. The calm, businesslike demeanor he had maintained was cracking, revealing the anger underneath. This is not a request, Trevor. This is what you are going to do. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed despite the absurdity of the situation. I mean exactly what I said. I am not giving either of you my money. Not 80%. Not 20%. Not even 1%. Kyle scoffed, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. So what, now that you have got a fancy job and a bit of cash? You are too good for your family. Typical Trevor, always thinking you are better than everyone else. This has nothing to do with thinking I am better than anyone, I replied evenly. This is about basic respect and fairness. I worked incredibly hard for this promotion. And this salary. I put myself through college while working multiple jobs. I earned this. Dad's eyes narrowed. And who do you think gave you the foundation for that success? Who put a roof over your head? Who drove you to school every day? Who paid for your food, your clothes, your doctor appointments? I almost laughed again at the revisionist history. Are you serious right now? You did the absolute legal minimum required as a parent. And even that stopped when I was 16. After Mom died, you checked out as my father. I got myself to school, bought my own clothes from thrift stores, and worked for every single thing I had. That is not true, Dad sputtered, though the momentary flicker in his eyes told me he knew I was right. I made sacrifices you know nothing about. What sacrifices, Dad? Please enlighten me. Was it a sacrifice to buy Kyle a new Mustang while I took the bus? Was it a sacrifice to pay for his 4 attempts at college while I worked 30 hours a week to afford mine? Or maybe it was a sacrifice to give him an allowance bigger than what some people make in a month while I ate ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week because it was all I could afford. Kyle jumped in his face, flushed with indignation. It is not my fault I needed more support. Not everyone is a robot who can work and study nonstop like you. Some of us are actually trying to enjoy life and find our passion. Finding your passion does not require a new car and unlimited cash, I shot back, and it certainly does not entitle you to my salary. Have you ever even had a job, Kyle? Even a part-time one? I had that thing at Dad's friend's office that one summer he mumbled. You mean where you showed up late every day, spent most of your time on your phone and quit after 3 weeks because it was too stressful? I recalled the administrative assistant position Dad had arranged for him 2 years ago. That barely counts. Dad slammed his hand on the table again. Enough about the past. We are talking about the present, about your responsibility to this family moving forward. My responsibility, I repeated the word, tasting bitter in my mouth. What about your responsibility as a father to treat your children equally? What about Kyle's responsibility to support himself as an adult? You do not understand how difficult things have been for Kyle, Dad insisted. He has struggled with finding direction. Because you never gave him any, I exclaimed, the realization hitting me fully for perhaps the first time. You never expected anything from him, never made him face consequences, never pushed him to stand on his own 2 feet. You failed him just as much as you failed me, just in a completely different way. Kyle stood up abruptly, his chair screeching against the hardwood floor. You do not know anything about my life or my struggles. Just because you had it so easy with your big brain and your perfect grades. I stared at him in disbelief. Easy? You think my life was easy? I was essentially orphaned at 16. Dad was physically present, but emotionally checked out for me. I raised myself while watching him shower you with everything I desperately needed but never got attention, support, love. There was nothing easy about it. You always have to make everything about you, Kyle sneered. Poor Trevor, so neglected, so misunderstood. Meanwhile, I had all this pressure to live up to your perfect example. Pressure, I laughed humorlessly. What pressure? You have failed at everything you have ever attempted, and Dad still thinks you walk on water. Where exactly was this pressure coming from? Dad stood up now too, his face contorted with anger. I will not have you speaking to your brother that way in my house. Kyle is sensitive. He needs support and encouragement, not criticism. And what did I need, Dad? I asked quietly. What did I need when Mom died, and I was left alone to figure everything out? What did I need when I was working multiple jobs as a teenager just to afford basic necessities? What did I need when I graduated college with honors? And you could barely be bothered to show up. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken pain hanging in the air between us. Dad finally broke the silence, his voice cold and resolute. This conversation is going nowhere. The fact remains that as a family we need your financial support. I am your father, and I am telling you this is what you are going to do. Or what I challenged, standing up as well, so that all 3 of us were now on our feet around the table. Or you are no son of mine, he said, the words cutting through the air like a knife. It is that simple. Either you help your family, or you are out. For good. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I processed his ultimatum. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. That is your choice, I asked. Either I give you and Kyle all of my money, or I am no longer your son. Dad nodded firmly. It is that simple. Then I guess I am not your son, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. Because I am leaving, and I am not giving either of you a dime. Pay your own bills. It is that simple. The look on his face was one I will never forget. Pure shock followed almost immediately by rage. It was clear he had never imagined I would refuse. In his mind, I was still the compliant child, desperate for his approval, willing to do anything to earn a scrap of his attention. "You ungrateful little," Dad sputtered, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "After everything I have done for you, what exactly have you done for me?" I asked again, gathering my keys and wallet from the table. "Name one thing you have done for me in the last 9 years that was not the bare minimum legal requirement of a parent." He opened and closed his mouth several times, but no specific examples were forthcoming. "That is what I thought," I said, turning to leave. Kyle stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. "You cannot just walk away from family like this. What kind of person does that make you?" I looked him straight in the eye. "It makes me someone who finally values himself enough to walk away from people who only see him as a resource to be exploited. Maybe one day you will understand." As I stepped around him, Dad found his voice again. "If you walk out that door, do not ever think about coming back. You are dead to me. Do you hear? Dead." I paused at the doorway, turned back one last time, and said the words that had been building inside me for years. "I have been dead to you since Mom died. The only difference now is that I am finally accepting it." With that, I walked out, the sound of my father's enraged shouting following me down the driveway. As I got into my car, I saw Kyle watching from the window, his expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. For the first time, he would have to face the reality that his safety net was gone. As I drove away from the house I grew up in, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the family relationship I had always wanted, but never had, anger at the years of unfair treatment, but also surprisingly relief. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free from the burden of seeking approval I would never receive. Little did I know that the fallout from this confrontation was only just beginning. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The full weight of what had just happened had not yet sunk in. I had effectively been disowned by my father, and I had walked away from my only remaining family. When I finally arrived home, I sat in my parked car for almost 20 minutes trying to process everything. Part of me was waiting for the regret to hit, for the crushing realization that I had made a terrible mistake, but it never came. Instead, I felt an odd sense of peace beneath the turmoil of emotions. I had finally stood up for myself after years of accepting scraps of attention and affection. I had refused to be exploited by the very people who should have supported me unconditionally. It hurt, yes, but it also felt right in a way I could not fully articulate yet. The calm did not last long. By the time I made it inside my apartment, my phone was already blowing up with texts and calls. The first wave came from my father and Kyle. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Dad. Way to abandon your family when we need you most. Selfish as always, Kyle. Do not think you can come crawling back when you realize how wrong you are, Dad. Hope you enjoy being alone forever, because that is what you chose, Kyle." I silenced my phone and tried to distract myself with television, but my mind kept replaying the confrontation on loop. The entitlement in their voices, the absolute certainty that they had a right to my earnings, the shock when I refused. It was all so surreal. Around 10 o'clock that night, the second wave began. Extended family members I barely spoke to started calling and messaging. "Your father is devastated. How could you do this to him, Uncle Robert? Family helps family. I thought you were raised better than this. Aunt Linda, Kyle is just going through a phase. He needs support right now. Cousin Melissa." It quickly became clear that my father had wasted no time spinning the story to make himself the victim. According to the version being circulated among the family, I had selfishly refused to help my struggling brother and aging father despite making hundreds of thousands of dollars. The fact that they had demanded 100% of my salary was conveniently omitted. By Monday morning, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. I called in sick to work for the first time since I had started there, unable to face the prospect of pretending everything was normal while my personal life imploded. The barrage continued throughout the week. Dad escalated from angry texts to voicemails filled with guilt trips and emotional manipulation. "I sacrificed everything for you boys after your mother died. Everything. And this is how you repay me. I never thought my own son would turn his back on family. Your mother would be so disappointed in you. That last one hit particularly hard. Mom had been gone for 9 years, but Dad knew exactly how to weaponize her memory against me. For a brief moment, I found myself questioning whether I was in the wrong. Would Mom have wanted me to support Kyle and Dad regardless of how unfairly they had treated me? The doubt lasted only until I remembered how Mom had actually been when she was alive. She had always encouraged me to stand up for myself, to know my worth, and to not let anyone take advantage of my kind nature, not even family. She would have been furious at Dad's behavior, not mine. By Wednesday, things took an even uglier turn. I received a text from Kyle that he had been by my apartment building while I was at work. "Just checking if your car was still there, or if you had skipped town like the coward you are," he wrote. The idea that he had been watching my building sent a chill down my spine. That evening, I got a call from my landlord. Someone had reported a disturbance at my apartment, claiming to have heard shouting and things breaking. When the landlord checked, of course, everything was fine since I had been at work all day. It did not take much to figure out who had made the false report. On Thursday night, I received a particularly disturbing voicemail from Dad. "I have been talking to a lawyer friend. Did you know that in some states children can be legally required to support their parents? Think about that before you keep ignoring my calls." That was the final straw. The next morning, I called a family law attorney and scheduled a consultation. The lawyer, a compassionate woman named Denise, listened to my story with growing concern. "What your father is referring to are filial responsibility laws," she explained. "They do exist in some states, but they typically only apply in very specific circumstances, usually involving parents who are destitute and unable to support themselves. From what you have told me, your father is employed and financially stable, just wanting more. You are not legally obligated to support him or your adult brother." She advised me to document all communication and to consider a cease and desist letter if the harassment continued. And just to be safe, she added, "I would recommend changing your phone number and being cautious about who you share your new contact information with." That weekend, I made some difficult but necessary decisions. I changed my phone number, increased security on all my social media accounts, and sent a brief email to my father. "Dad, I am not going to discuss this any further. My decision is final. I will not be financially supporting you or Kyle. I am changing my phone number and will not be responding to messages from either of you for the foreseeable future. I need space to process everything that has happened. If and when I am ready to have a relationship again, it will be on my terms with clear boundaries and mutual respect." I copied Kyle on the email, then blocked both their email addresses. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but also one of the most necessary. The extended family messages continued for a while, but I responded to each one with a simple, "This is between my father, my brother, and me. I appreciate your concern, but I am not discussing it further." Eventually, the flood slowed to a trickle. For the first time in my life, I had cut contact with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, but had only ever seen me as a resource to be exploited. The grief was real and profound, but so was the relief. I was finally free to live my life on my own terms, without the constant weight of seeking approval I would never receive. The hardest part was not the angry messages or the family drama. It was facing the reality that the family I had always wanted, the father who would be proud of me, the brother who would be my friend, they had never really existed. I had been chasing ghosts, hoping that somehow, if I just tried hard enough, was successful enough, gave enough, they would finally see me and love me for who I was. Letting go of that illusion was painful, but it was also the first step toward healing. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I was sitting in a small coffee shop with my coworker Marcus, finally sharing the full story of what had happened with my family. I had returned to work the day after changing my phone number, throwing myself into projects to avoid dwelling on the situation, but the weight of it all was becoming too much to bear alone. "So they seriously expected you to give them your entire salary?" Marcus asked, his coffee forgotten, as he listened to my story. "And they had it all written out on spreadsheets and everything?" I nodded, still finding it hard to believe myself. "They had it all planned out. Dad even had a contract drawn up for me to sign." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Man, I warned you about family getting weird about money, but this is next level. Are you doing okay? That simple question nearly broke me. Was I okay? I had been so focused on managing the practical aspects of the situation, changing my number, securing my accounts, dealing with the legal consultation, that I had barely allowed myself to process the emotional impact. I do not know, I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. Part of me feels like I should be devastated about cutting ties with my only family. But another part feels relieved. Like I have finally put down a burden I have been carrying my whole life. Both of those feelings make sense, Marcus said. Have you considered talking to someone professional about all this? I started seeing a therapist last year after my divorce, and it helped more than I expected. The suggestion caught me off guard. Therapy had never been something discussed in our household growing up. Dad considered it a sign of weakness, something only truly damaged people needed. But I was beginning to realize just how many unhealthy beliefs I had inherited from him. That might not be a bad idea, I conceded. That conversation with Marcus was the first of many supportive interactions that would help me through the coming months. After our coffee, he invited me to join him and some friends for a game night that weekend. No pressure, just people hanging out, having fun. Might be good to get your mind off things for a while. I accepted the invitation reluctantly, not feeling particularly social, but forcing myself to go turned out to be one of the best decisions I could have made. At Marcus's apartment, I met Jessica, a graphic designer with a quick wit and kind eyes, and Alex, a software engineer from another company who shared my interest in hiking. For a few hours, I was able to laugh and engage in conversations that had nothing to do with family drama or financial obligations. By the end of the night, I had exchanged numbers with both of them, the beginning of friendships that would become increasingly important to me. The following week, I had my first appointment with Dr. Tamara Chen, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Walking into her office, I felt awkward and self-conscious, still half believing I was overreacting to the whole situation. Family estrangement is more common than most people realize, Dr. Chen said after I had recounted the basic details of what had happened. And contrary to popular belief, it is rarely a decision people make lightly or without significant cause. Over the following sessions, Dr. Chen helped me unpack not just the recent confrontation, but years of unequal treatment, emotional neglect, and the complicated grief of losing my mother while simultaneously losing the emotional support of my father. What you are describing sounds like a pattern of narcissistic family dynamics, she explained during one particularly insightful session. Your father positioned Kyle as what we call the golden child, and you as the scapegoat. These roles are not about who you are as individuals, but about what you represent and how you serve the narcissist's needs. Learning about these dynamics was both painful and liberating. It helped me understand that the treatment I had received was not because I was unlovable or unworthy, but because of my father's own limitations and issues. One of the most challenging aspects of therapy was dealing with the guilt. Despite everything, I still sometimes felt like I was abandoning my family, particularly Kyle. Your brother is an adult, Dr. Chen reminded me gently. By refusing to continue enabling his dependence, you might actually be doing him a favor in the long run. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone is to stop shielding them from the natural consequences of their actions. Outside of therapy, I was slowly building a support network. Game nights with Marcus and his friends became a regular occurrence. Jessica and I started meeting for coffee on Wednesday mornings before work, a small ritual that gave me something to look forward to midweek. Alex introduced me to a hiking group that met monthly to explore trails around Phoenix. About 3 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my mother's sister, Aunt Diane. We had lost touch after Mom's death, primarily because Dad had discouraged contact with her side of the family. Trevor, I just heard from Linda about what happened between you, your father, and Kyle. Her message began. I want you to know that I do not believe the version being circulated. Your mother always worried about how Gerald favored Kyle even when you were all young. If you are willing, I would love to reconnect and hear your side of the story. Meeting Aunt Diane for lunch the following weekend was like finding a piece of my mother I thought had been lost forever. She had the same warm smile, the same genuine interest in my life and well-being that Mom had always shown. Your father was always this way, she revealed as we shared dessert. Even when he was dating your mother, there were signs. He could be charming and generous one minute, then cold and withholding the next. Your grandfather never trusted him. She shared stories about my mother I had never heard, about her strength and resilience, her protective nature when it came to me. She always worried that Gerald favored Kyle too, obviously. She used to talk to me about it, about her fears of what might happen to the family dynamic if anything happened to her. Why did she stay with him? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Aunt Diane sighed. Your mother loved deeply and believed in commitment. She also grew up in a time when divorce was still somewhat stigmatized. By the time she was diagnosed with cancer, I think she was more focused on spending her remaining time with you boys than on making major life changes. Learning about these aspects of my parents' relationship helped me understand that the dysfunction in our family had roots that preceded my birth. It was not something I had caused or could have fixed, no matter how hard I tried. As months passed, I continued to work on myself, both in therapy and through self-reflection. I started journaling, a practice Dr. Chen had suggested, which helped me process my thoughts and track my emotional progress. I joined a support group for adults estranged from family members, where I found understanding from others who had made similar difficult choices. The healing process was not linear. There were days when I felt strong and confident in my decision, and others when grief would hit me unexpectedly, leaving me questioning everything. The first holiday season without family was particularly difficult, but Jessica invited me to join her family's Thanksgiving dinner, and Marcus included me in his Christmas plans. Slowly, I was building a chosen family of people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I was learning that family connections can be about mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation and exploitation. 6 months after cutting contact, I received my first direct communication from my father since the confrontation. It was a brief email that simply read, "We need to talk. Things have changed." I stared at those words for a long time, feeling the pull of hope, but also the caution born from experience. Whatever this new development was, I knew I would face it from a position of greater strength and clarity than I had possessed 6 months ago. The journey of setting boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. I was no longer the person desperate for approval at any cost. I had found my voice, and more importantly, I had found my worth. 6 months turned into a year, and life had taken on a new rhythm. I had been promoted again at work, this time to lead developer, with a small team under my guidance. My apartment, once just a place to sleep between work shifts, had become a true home, decorated with hiking photos from trips with Alex and the hiking group, bookshelves filled with titles recommended by Jessica, and even a few small plants I was proud to have kept alive. After much consideration and discussion with Dr. Chen, I had decided to respond to my father's email with clear boundaries. I am open to talking, but only with a family therapist present. He had initially balked at the suggestion, claiming we could work things out ourselves, but eventually agreed when I made it clear it was my only condition for re-establishing contact. Our first session had been tense and uncomfortable. Dad arrived looking older than I remembered the past year, clearly having taken a toll. Kyle was notably absent. "Where is Kyle?" I asked as we settled into the therapist's office. Dad shifted uncomfortably. He moved out 3 months ago. Got a job at a warehouse and is sharing an apartment with some friends. The news surprised me. He actually got a job and moved out. "Did not have much choice," Dad admitted grudgingly. "After you left, things got tight financially." I told him he needed to start contributing. It was the closest thing to vindication I could have imagined. Without me, there to serve as the family bank, Dad had finally been forced to push Kyle toward independence. The therapy session itself was challenging. Dad still struggled to take responsibility for his role in our estrangement, frequently falling back on phrases like, "I did the best I could," and "You do not understand how hard it was." But there were also moments of genuine reflection, brief glimpses of awareness that suggested he might be capable of change. At the end of the session, as we were scheduling a follow-up, Dad awkwardly handed me an envelope. I wrote some things down. Things I should have said today but could not get out right. Maybe you could read it before next time." I accepted the envelope cautiously, not opening it until I was alone in my car. Inside was a letter that, while not exactly an apology, was perhaps the most honest communication I had ever received from my father. Trevor, I realize now that I was unfair to you growing up. After your mother died, I struggled more than I let on. Kyle reminded me of her, and focusing on him was easier than dealing with my grief. That was not your fault, and you deserved better. I know I cannot undo the past, but I want to try to have some kind of relationship with you moving forward if you are willing. It was not perfect, but it was a start. Over the following months, we continued the therapy sessions, slowly rebuilding a relationship that, while not close, was at least based on more honest footing than before. Kyle and I had our own reconciliation of sorts, though it came about differently than with Dad. 3 months after I learned he had moved out, I received a text from an unknown number. It is Kyle. Got a new phone. Can we talk? We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our respective apartments. The Kyle who showed up was different from the entitled young man I had left behind a year ago. He looked tired but more grounded, wearing the uniform from his warehouse job, which he had come to meet me directly after his shift. I owe you an apology, he said after we had awkwardly ordered our drinks. I was a real jerk to you. For years, not just at the end. What brought this on? I asked, suspicious of his sudden change of heart. He laughed humorlessly. Reality. Once you were gone, and Dad realized you were serious about not giving us money, everything changed. Suddenly, I had to get a job, pay rent, budget for groceries. Turns out real life is a lot harder than I thought. We talked for nearly 2 hours that day. Kyle shared his struggles adjusting to adult responsibilities, his resentment toward Dad for not preparing him better, and his gradual realization of how unfairly I had been treated all those years. I always knew Dad favored me, he admitted. But I told myself it was because I needed more help than you did. You always seemed so capable, like you had everything figured out. I did not, I assured him. I was just trying to survive. Our relationship now is cautious but improving. We meet for dinner once a month, carefully avoiding discussing money or Dad too much. Kyle is taking classes at community college now, paying his own way, and seems to have matured considerably in the past year. Dad and I have settled into a new normal as well. We talk on the phone every couple of weeks and meet for lunch about once a month. He still occasionally makes comments that show he has not completely changed his perspective, but he respects the boundaries I have established. He knows that asking for money or showing favoritism toward Kyle in my presence will result in me immediately ending the interaction. The most surprising development came 3 months ago when Dad mentioned he had started seeing someone, a widow he met at a community center event. Having someone new in his life seems to have shifted his focus away from trying to control his sons. As for me, the promotion at work came with another salary increase, allowing me to start saving for a down payment on a small house. I have been dating Jessica for the past 4 months. A relationship that developed naturally from our friendship and is built on mutual respect and support. The hiking group has become a central part of my social life, providing both outdoor adventure and community. Most importantly, I have learned to value myself and to recognize when relationships are healthy versus exploitative. I have built a life filled with people who appreciate me for who I am, not what I can provide for them. The journey has not been easy. There were many nights I questioned my decision, many moments of grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never had. Yet through the pain came growth and a kind of freedom I had never experienced before. While I could not choose my family, I realized I could choose how I respond to them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to stop enabling harmful behavior. I am still open to having my father and brother in my life, but only if they can respect me as an equal. Until then, I am focusing on building the life I deserve, surrounding myself with people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Has anyone else had to make difficult choices about family relationships? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you are not alone in these challenges makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.